Hey, it's Jonathan Walsh with the Downtown Rescue Mission. This is another episode of Stories of Hope, and I'm here with Joey. You
Yes,
go
sir,
by,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And I'm going to let you tell us about a little bit about yourself. Take us back to your childhood and kind of lead us into the story, and we'll just continue the conversation.
Sure, definitely. So my name is Joseph Torres. I go by Joey. I'm in my third step of this program. I've been here for coming up on 7 months. It's been a great time, honestly. I really enjoyed my time here.
Cool.
I'm originally not even from Huntsville. I'm actually originally from San Diego, California.
What area?
Southern California, like South San
'Cause
Diego.
my brother's from Encinitas.
Nice, okay.
Yeah, so I know that
so
area a little bit.
I'm from more like City Heights.
Okay,
So like
gotcha.
really farther like southeastern San Diego.
Yeah.
And I grew up there. I was born in Escondido, California. And I mean, I've lived in California for 25 years, and then I moved out here, just having money problems and stuff. You know,
You surf?
I don't surf, no.
No surfing?
No surfing. I love the beach though. I like to
Okay.
like diving more. You know. Go
Okay,
swimming.
yeah.
Yeah. Did a little bit of lifeguarding for a couple years, so that was fun too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I moved out here. Things got real expensive out in California.
Did you have family out here?
I did.
Okay.
I got my mom lives out here. My sisters, they moved out here when I was 18. I had just started college at San Diego State,
Okay.
and I went there for 3 years, and I ended up getting into a bad motorcycle accident at the beginning of my third year, like 2 days before class started, and wasn't able to walk for a little bit, so I stopped going to class, and I ended up working like from home, and then I just decided not to go back to school, you know, and kind of regret that, but you know, I do like that I ended up, you know, getting more into trades. I started doing metal work.
So what grade did you get into up to high school?
Yeah, I graduated high school.
So you graduated high school?
I actually had a scholarship to San Diego State.
Oh, wow.
I had like
Okay.
a 3.9 GPA when I graduated high school. I played football, wrestled, did track, and baseball. And I was real into auto shop. I did competitions for like Edelbrock Corporation.
Oh, wow.
Read it for Kids Challenge. Built carburetors for the National Carburetor Build they do. They hosted that at the Del Mar Fair.
So you work on the cars here now?
I do. Yeah, I do all the whole
I was
fleet.
thinking someone probably
Yeah,
got hold
yeah.
of those skill set.
Yeah, I mean, I work on everybody's cars, man. Even personal vehicles, fleet vehicles, everything.
Okay.
I just finished working on our Chevy Trax, putting a new thermostat in that today, and what else did we do? Put a junction in for the what do you call it, water pump inlet
Gotcha.
hose. Yeah,
That's a blessing for the mission.
yeah, and
That
it's
skill set,
a
wow.
blessing for me too, man, to be able to keep my skills fresh. You know.
Yeah.
I was a mechanic for a while, just by profession and trade. I went to school through Toyota down in Jacksonville.
Okay.
And I worked at Bill Penny Toyota here for about 3 years. So
Yeah,
cool.
you jammed a lot in. And how old are you?
I'm 30.
30, okay.
Yes, sir.
And you have girlfriend, anything like
No, I've got a 4-year-old son.
Okay.
That
his name?
His name is Lucas,
Okay.
and his life has been spent with me. You know, I've raised him. You know, I had full custody of him up until I came up here, and then right now my mom's got him up until I graduate. You know, he's one of the biggest reasons I'm here. You
That's
know, I wanted
awesome.
to get my stuff together. I really wasn't doing well, so.
So my son is Luke.
Nice.
But growing up, he always got called Lucas.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, it's Luke. Like he would remind people all the time. But yeah, it's funny because when you said Lucas, I remember the days when like all of our friends, we were like, oh, Lucas, where's Lucas? I'm like, it's Luke.
That's funny.
And
That's
how old
funny.
Luke? Is
He
Luke?
just turned 4. He
Okay,
just turned
4.
4 on the 23rd
Very
of
cool.
last month. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been
Cool to have a son.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
He is my life. You know, he really
Yeah.
is, and love him to death, man. You know,
Gotcha.
his mom wasn't really big in being a mom, and just didn't want to be involved. You know, since initially his birth, and
Gotcha.
she has remained out of his life. She's
And she's
in
not
Seattle.
pursuing anything?
No, I mean, she's never really had an interest of it.
Okay, so you have full custody of him.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not hindered or anything like that. That's great.
No, I mean, like right now, I've given temporary custody to my mom. That's
Yeah.
just like kind of something me and her did.
Mhm.
Not like
While
a
you were
court-
working
yeah,
on it yourself. That,
Yeah, I didn't like
That's
not.
sharp.
Yeah, we did that privately. You know, not through a court system or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, me and her had that conversation. Did some paperwork just so you know, with enrolling him in school, tax things, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, get the
So,
best out of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay, so tell some of our viewers and tell my, I want to know a little bit about what were the things that kind of led you down the path before you came into the mission?
Well,
you said a little bit about, not going to college, taking some college courses, and then kind of going right into trade work and stuff like
yeah.
that.
So I tried to live on my own when I was in California, and I did live on my own from when I started college up until I moved out here, almost 5 years ago now, and just things didn't work out. I didn't really have a career that I really found like a fit in. When I moved out here, I became a mechanic, and that was the first time I'd ever done that professionally. In college I had done FSAE, which is like formula for the college for San Diego State. And then in high school, I did that stuff with the Edelbrock Corporation, with the engine builds and stuff. So, I like cars. I knew how to do the work. And I decided to go to school. And, I did well. I did well as a tech.
That's a good skill set.
Yeah. I did that for years. And, I just got tired. Started, using substances to kind of increase my energy and stuff.
Yeah.
And that didn't go well. And I just wasn't doing things right. I started going down the wrong path. I ended up leaving my job, not because of anything like that, but just I had personal differences with the management. And, we were arguing a lot, and I just decided the best thing to do was leave. And I left, and I kind of tried to do things my own privately, doing my own work. But at that point, I started getting into a bad place in my life, and I'd been kind of in a bad place in my life for a good while. I struggled with depression, anxiety.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that place right there.
Well, no matter what I did,
because it's different for everybody.
It is, but I'm trying to find the best way to word this. Something was always missing.
Okay.
And genuinely, just I always felt empty. I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't doing right. And dude, I got really, really bad, and places where I got to be. And especially right before I came to the mission, I'd spiraled pretty much as far as anybody could spiral. I'd lost pretty much everything. I'd lost my places, my apartment. I'd lost my truck. I'd lost every job I'd had. And that's, right by the time I started talking to my mom about taking my son and having custody of him so that I could come here and get my life together.
And sometimes when that stuff is our identity, and then we start to lose it, then we're like, okay, what am I? Who am I?
And it's crazy because there's so many different things that I learned from that, but more importantly, not just from that, what I learned when I first came here and, found Christ or Christ found me.
Started a relationship, right?
Well, the best way that I could really put it, for me, it's hard to put in words, but leading up to being here, I was always looking for reasons to feel bad, feel sorry for myself and feel bad, and feel like I needed to be saved. And I when I did start praying and I did start trying to reach out to God, I always wanted him to save me, and I always felt like he wasn't going to save me. And it wasn't until I came here and I started getting more into the Word that I realized he already did, and
because we think that we're not worth being saved,
100%,
right? And
100%.
then we start to recognize that God, he doesn't look at us that way. We're valuable.
100%. And he's already paid the price for us.
That's right.
And that was the thing that really woke me up, and the thing that really changed my life was realizing that I needed to stop paying attention to reasons to be sad and reasons to feel bad and feel, that depression, and start looking at what I was grateful for. And man, I can't tell you,
that's a good shift.
It was amazing. Yeah. It was amazing.
That's the renewing of the mind, right?
Yeah, and
because we have a mindset that has to be rebuilt and looked at things differently. The same things that we viewed before, we have to view them differently.
Oh, dude, my motivation came back. My anxiety went out the window. I started waking up happy, and it came from every little thing. And I started, having these just kind of like personal, interactions with God that I started noticing, and it was like little things.
He likes those.
Yeah, he likes, and I love him. I really do. I love him because I know that he's got a plan for me, and I find so much comfort in that, and it relieves so much anxiety. But it's little things. It's like one of the reasons I decided to come here, and I decided to start pursuing faith again, was at one point, during my spiral, I went to go stay with a buddy of mine, and I was sleeping in a car in his driveway. And one day, I had no phone, I had nothing to do. I was sitting in the car getting ready to sleep, and I was bored. I couldn't sleep. I had all this anxiety going on, and I said, hey, man, you got a book I can read? He handed me a Bible. You know, he said, "Read this."
It is the best-selling
It is the best,
book.
you know. And it was the best thing he could have done, really. You know, I think that probably saved my life. You know,
Yeah,
genuinely.
that's cool.
And I went and I got in the car and I had this really weird. It's kind of a weird story, you know, to tell to people, but I'll never forget this. You know, this kind of you know, personal interaction I had with, you know, I like to think, you know, it was with God.
We do. We should have that. We should strive for that. Let's put it that way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I opened up that Bible and got to Genesis and I started reading. I got to the part where it says, you know, God said, "Let there be light." And it was funny because I was reading this Bible in the front seat of this car at 11 p.m. at night. You know, there's no light.
Yeah.
I was struggling to read it, but I really wanted to read it, you know, so I was trying real hard. And, you know, my life felt very dark overall. And so I just prayed a prayer, you know, right then. I was like, you know what? I'm reading the Bible. I'm getting back into my faith. I'm going to pray. I hadn't prayed in years. And I prayed, "Let there be light." And I will never forget. I was sitting in the front seat of this car. And again, you know, you got the windshield in front of you. Well, in front of me, there's trees, clouds, and there was the moon. And the clouds parted. And through the trees and these clouds, the shape of an eye illuminated the sky. It showed in. And I mean, it was like
Get
an
out of
eyeball.
here.
Like
That's
it was just
awesome.
a perfect outline of an eyeball looking right at me. And it lit up the whole front of the car. And I said, "Oh, yeah.
He's
all right.
he's in the details.
Yeah, I said,
He
he's
is in the
listening, you know?
details,
Yeah,
yeah.
I said, all right, he's listening,
That's
you know?
cool.
And that was just one of those moments where I realized, I'm like, all right, well, I need to do something,
Yeah.
you know? God sees this.
That's
you
pretty
know?
cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was awesome. And it doesn't end there.
He does that for our benefit
100%.
because he doesn't need that.
He does it.
But
and
he does have a sense of humor, so he's like, you know what? Let me just shed some light on this.
100%, 100%. And I mean, it was encouragement for me, you know,
That's
because
cool.
I was already headed that direction. You know,
He knew
and
what you needed in that moment.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then it was just
Yeah.
it was that affirmation, and you know, not just that, but then I came and I you know, learned about the program here, and I had at that time I was already thinking about coming to the program,
Okay.
and I came and I got into the program,
Yep.
and they handed out Bibles, you know, when we first started, first day of class,
Okay.
and the Bible that I got handed to my first day of class was a carbon copy of the one that my friend had handed me. It's the same edition, same, you know, it was a
It's
Gideon's
exactly
Bible.
what you introduced yourself back to.
It was remarkable. It was the
That's
exact
cool.
same Bible, and the guy that gave me that Bible, his name's Derek, Derek Battles, and his I don't know if they're cousins or it's his uncle. I can't remember the exact relationship, but James Battle,
Yeah.
that's in my step,
Okay.
is related to him.
Yeah. And he's
You know,
back.
Uh-huh.
And hopefully, you know, for him it clicks again
Yeah.
this time. But you know what? Sometimes it takes, who knows? Sometimes it takes one time. Sometimes it might take 3 times.
But
Who knows?
those two things, you know, having the same Bible,
Yeah.
and then to be in this program with a family member of somebody that had such a, you know, profound impact on me.
Reinforcing,
It
yeah.
totally did. And you know, and it's little things like that it's not necessarily like a huge influence on my faith, because that faith's already there, but it strengthens it so much with those little things.
It makes it tangible and it makes it real.
Uh-huh.
Right? Because we can all walk around and say we have a relationship with God, but until it comes from the head to the heart, it's not applied. You
So
know?
I'll give you another example that I thought was pretty funny. It's not big, profound or anything like that, but I go to Madison First Bible
Okay.
Church.
Yeah.
And I try to go every Sunday, but 2 weeks ago, I went and I was taking my son fishing for the first time that Sunday after church. And during the sermon, he started preaching about taking kids fishing. And he said, you know, you ever tried to take a 4-year-old fishing? And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to later
For the
today.
first time.
For the first time, you know. And it was hilarious because, you know, he'd never talked about that before.
Yeah.
And, you know, he brought that up right, you know, 2 hours before I went and took my son. And he talked about, you know, how faith is like teaching a kid to fish sometimes, you know, or
Yeah.
you know, bringing people to it, you know.
I know
And
what yeah.
and it's hard sometimes, you know, how it is to lead somebody to salvation,
Especially a 4-year-old.
especially a 4-year-old. But you know, and then we went and I had a great time with my son. You know, he caught 3 fish. I didn't catch any. You know, it was a lot of fun.
But
we
he had a
got
great
tried.
time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he probably stored that up. That'll be a moment for him.
Oh, dude, definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was funny because I went with my 2 sisters too, and my nieces and nephews.
Okay.
And all the kids caught fish.
So how many people do you have in your family?
So I've got my mom, my stepdad, my 2 sisters, my little brother, and then each of my sisters have, well, my youngest sister has 3 kids, and then the
Okay.
older of my 2 younger
Big
sisters
family.
has 2, and then my little brother. So
Gotcha.
it is a very big family, and then my son.
Tight knit,
Yeah,
pretty much.
we were, you know.
Okay. It's
I'm
it's
a bit,
intentional, and if you
you
don't
know,
work on it,
it
it's
is.
not.
It
It won't
is.
happen.
Well, I mean, I got a bit estranged from my family, you
Mhm.
know, just from my actions.
Yeah.
You know, I got pushed away, and it sucked, you know. But I did it to myself. I did it to myself, and I mean, since I've been here, I've reconnected with everybody,
That's awesome.
and it's been great, you know. And
Yeah.
them being able to see me and see the change, see how much healthier I've been.
God
you know.
restores things as we
100%.
put the work in.
100%. Both my sisters started going to church,
That's
really, since
awesome.
I've started here. So
Yeah, that's really good.
it's
It's like we talked about, right? The power in the testimony.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they're seeing you live out your testimony,
Uh-huh.
and it's probably reigniting, maybe where they were, maybe where they never been,
yeah,
but whatever. It gets contagious almost.
Yeah.
You know, when you see other people kind of like being attracted to God, and their life is coming together. It's
100%.
like, oh, maybe I want to try that.
100%, 100%. And I mean, you know, I struggled with substance abuse for 10 years, you know, and I mean, that's,
So tell us a little bit about that
Okay.
struggle. Yeah.
well, I went to San Diego State College, or San Diego State University, and let's see, I was 21 when I started using cocaine, and it was kind of,
So you didn't skip any steps. You went right to the hard
I went,
stuff.
well, I mean, I smoked marijuana
Okay.
when I was like 18, but I had
Yeah.
it was in California,
Mhm.
and I had a medical card for it, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like a borderline thing with that, you know, but
I have a nephew that's struggled with substance abuse his whole
Yep.
life. So, and he's from San Diego. So
I get it. I get it. With medical marijuana, though, I tried to use it like a medicine. I worked for, the cannabis industry, like
Gotcha.
medically. So I wasn't like just smoking it for fun. I was actually using it for
Mhm.
like back pain and stuff like that. And
Okay.
it was really more, I wasn't really smoking it so much. I was using
pain
like,
management.
pain management, like what do you call it, tinctures
Mhm.
or lotions, even
Gotcha.
topicals and stuff. But I mean, I started using
Like
it
the
for-
THC portion of it, right?
I was more into CBD actually.
Oh, okay.
You know, I didn't really want to be like mentally
Yeah.
high,
Mhm.
which THC does.
From it, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
because I had a job for a little bit as a delivery driver,
Gotcha.
and being on a motorcycle, you don't want to be, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've driven motorcycles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier that's why I stopped going to college, is I got into an accident.
Motorcycle accident?
Yeah, I got hit head on.
Because you're talking to a motorcycle guy.
Oh,
years on
nice,
motorcycles.
nice. I
The
miss
job
it.
before this was with Harley.
Really?
Yeah. So
awesome, man.
and my brother, the reason why I know San Diego, I mean, it's everybody's riding a motorcycle.
Oh
up
yeah,
there.
I mean all year round.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
weather's great.
So what happened with the accident? Like,
So I was driving on Balboa Avenue in San Diego, right off the 163, and
Balboa, right?
Yeah,
Right,
I don't know if
right
you're-
near the park.
not near Balboa Park, but Balboa Avenue,
Okay.
maybe 10 minutes from the park.
I'm kind of familiar
But
with
it's
it.
3 lanes of traffic in either direction,
Mhm.
and I was in the center lane on my side, and a guy was speeding, coming back from getting Jack in the Box or something,
Mhm.
swerved into oncoming traffic.
Late night.
Late night,
Gotcha.
wasn't paying attention, didn't see the bike, and he was trying to make a weird turn because he was speeding, he was going so fast.
Came into you, cut your lane.
Dude, he just went straight into my bike. I didn't even have time to hit the brakes. I
Wow.
got tossed over his car about 50 feet, dislocated my leg, and it's a big ordeal. And I mean, looking
Most
back
people
at
don't
it,
get second chances on that.
most
stuff,
people don't. And you know what's crazy about that is looking back at it now,
Mhm.
you know, it speaks volumes to me about, God's plan for me.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I didn't think much of it, but you're looking back at it, man, the paramedics, the nurses, the ER doctors, the police officer that first showed up on the scene, every single person was like, how are you alive?
Yeah.
My bike was blown into pieces. I cleared an intersection before I hit the
No,
ground.
a lot of buddies I lost over the years with just that same scenario, but they're
Yeah.
not here to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I've had
Yeah.
friends, lose
Yeah.
their lives to less.
So, so God has something to plan
Yeah,
for you
yeah.
to finish
Well,
out.
I mean, the fact that I walked away from it, I mean, I was limping, don't get me wrong, because
Mm-hmm.
I dislocated my leg, but I had all my body parts, I survived, and I mean, and to be in such good condition after going that far, I mean,
Yeah.
the only explanation for it was that
Yeah.
God had a plan for me, and dying that day wasn't part of it,
That's right. That's right.
But that year after that
Mm-hmm.
accident, I started using coke, and I didn't even really ever intend to. I was at a party in Vegas for a buddy of mine for his 21st birthday. And I thought, one time ain't going to hurt. And it did, and I ended up sticking with it for about 10 years. I didn't have a problem with it up until the end. It was more of just a casual thing. But,
an expensive casual thing.
Very expensive casual thing, But, I ended up getting to the point where, I would use it for work. I'd be tired and I'd be like, oh, dude, I need to wake up. I need a little extra energy, and that's not a good place to be.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable at all.
Not at all.
And it just, I think, obviously that had a lot to do with, me falling apart, but, more than that too, just, it amplified everything else that was going on that was negative,
Gotcha.
Stuff with, what happened with my kid's mom, and her kind of just the way she handled that, it's a long story, but
So did she walk away from the relationship because you were using, or
No, I actually was clean during that whole relationship. That was probably the longest I'd been sober since I'd started using it, and especially when I found out I was gonna have a child.
Yeah.
His mom had a drug problem, and she didn't have a drug problem when we were together. But when we split, she moved back to California. She was pregnant. We'd only been together for a couple months.
Right.
And, things went south. She moved back to California, and I started using, and I didn't know about it. I didn't find out about that, honestly, until about halfway through the custody battle. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it's a lot. But the day before my son was born, she tried to OD. And
Gotcha.
she took benzos. She took some heroin, all kinds of different things. I think she might have had some methamphetamines in her system.
Is that for attention from you? Or was that
no, she was trying to kill herself. More than that, she was trying to kill my son.
Yeah.
And she almost
to get
did.
back at you?
I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
I don't ever really talk to her. I've never really had a chance to talk to her. She did that. My son spent 2 days dying in the hospital, which after the first day she left and left him there, and had another family pick him up that had apparently gone through the process of adopting my son. None of this I knew. None of this I was informed about.
Right.
Signatures on that paperwork had been forged. It was a big ordeal. And I'd have to sit here for 2 hours and go through the whole thing with you. And none of that held. I took that family to court.
And we don't need to know the details. Here's the thing. God was in the midst of that situation, because now that your kid is with you in a loving home.
Oh, 100%.
And has an opportunity to have a relationship with God.
And all the things that I have against my child's mom, I've tried to put aside, but we did for a little bit. We communicated every once in a while. After I'd won custody of him and brought him back over here with me, because that took 9 months. After all that, she still wanted to fight me over it. Just that part was spiteful, definitely. She was kind of pissed off that I'd got him back, and the family that she had adopted him, she'd gotten paid $50,000 for, and she had to get that money back. So she was a bit, she was angry about it. Again, it's a whole bitterness. It's a whole ordeal. We need a whole other podcast session to go over all that. It was a 9-month thing, but
and the more you put your life back in order, she might not be completely out of the picture.
And I always tried to keep that open with her, but it's just not something she was ever interested in. She won't even call him on his birthday. It's that kind of thing. She won't answer the phone if I try to call her.
Gotcha.
But that's not what we're here to talk about today. But I did have that conversation with her at one point, where she called me up about, my son must have been about 1.5 years. And she said, I'm really glad that you won custody. She had been living with her parents all through that whole ordeal.
This is the final conversation you had with her?
This is, the last real conversation I'd had with her. And she said, I am really glad that you won custody. She says, I don't know, what was going on. This is what she said. I don't know what was going on with me. But she says, looking at where I was at and where my family was at, she says, I don't know if he would have made it. And, it was good to hear.
That's actually, she turned the page a little bit.
100%. And I hold a lot of that against myself, because even going through all that and having my son go through all that, for me to still turn to the substances and, have the problems that I did, makes me feel very guilty. And I have a lot of,
I can understand that. But you know what? Sometimes we go through those trials because God's building something in us out of those trials.
100%.
So
100%.
the person you are now isn't necessarily the person that you were before you started going through that.
I'm definitely not the same person.
Yeah.
And my son comes and he sees me here at the mission once a week.
Yeah.
You know, he comes
Cool.
by, he hangs out. He knows all the guys.
That's awesome.
He comes every Friday about 5 o'clock. He hangs
Very
out for
cool.
2 hours. Yeah.
I'd like to meet him.
Oh, yeah. His name's Lucas, you know.
Cool. Yeah. So okay, so you got us through drug use, the accident, getting here, still maintaining some type of substance abuse, right? While you were here, right?
At the mission?
Yeah. No.
I was like, no.
I'm saying in Alabama. When you
at Alabama, yeah.
When
yeah.
you first showed up from San Diego to here.
In San Diego, that was when I really had my substance abuse problem. And I mean, I started getting back into it as a mechanic, honestly,
Gotcha.
you know, and I just got really tired. You know, I was parenting
Because of the schedule and stuff.
Dude, I wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
You know, I had a newborn baby, and I was working, you know, as a flat rate technician. You know, you're there 12 hours a day,
Yep.
7 days. Not 7.
Trying to get
6
through the
days
work.
a week.
Yeah.
You know, well, and the thing was, you know, you'd be there 70 hours, but if you only do 40 hours of work on paper, you only get paid for the 40 hours. So it was tough. You know, money was a problem. Sleep was a problem. My schedule was a problem. Everything was just kind of overwhelming, and I was getting tons of anxiety, tons of depression.
Gotcha.
You know, and there was always something still feeling like it was missing. I just couldn't put a finger on it, and you know, I ended up getting a problem back. You know, I moved away from it when I'd moved out here, and I'd moved away from it when my kid was born. You know, in that first year, you know, I wasn't touching it, but the more tired I got eventually, you know, I was like, you know
the
what?
box has a lid, right? So
we can
put it on the shelf as many
know?
times as we want,
Yeah.
but sometimes when we keep taking the lid off, or just keep reintroducing bad habits, right? So you're in Alabama, maintaining a mechanic's job, right? And then, and I guess just substance use, feeling tired all the time.
Yeah, and I was depressed, dude.
Yeah.
I was still in a dark place, you know? And I mean, especially with what had happened with the custody and with everything that happened with my kid's mom. I mean, I didn't have anything against my son. I didn't have anything against anything like that. But the feelings of having to go through that, you know, and that why me, you know, and
Yeah, we go down that path.
Yeah, you know, and
it
was a bad place. And I mean, spiritually, I wasn't allowing myself to have that connection with God. You know, I wasn't allowing myself to feel it, you know.
Yeah, we closed off to it,
100%, you know. And what's interesting is I was actually raised Catholic.
Okay.
And
same here.
And I went through confirmation, baptism, all that, you know. And it was something I was raised with, and I just didn't take it seriously. You know, I hate to say it.
Well, you're removed, right? You're like one step removed, and there's nothing against the Catholic religion, because there's Catholicism. There's people that are still having a relationship with God.
100%, yeah.
But if you're only going through the priest and you're not feeling that relationship, or feeling like you have an inroad to Jesus, to have an actual personal relationship, obviously, you know, it feels so removed.
Well, the other thing too, for me personally, and I'm not trying to, you know, generalize about anybody, but me personally, being a teenager, which was when I was going through my confirmations and stuff. Yeah. What I got out of it was that I should try my best to be a good Catholic, you know, good Christian. Good person. But if I messed up, all I had to do was go to confession. This, and this. Yeah, this is what I did. Order, right? I got to say, you know, my Our Fathers and my Hail Marys, and I'll be forgiven. And
do you really mean it? Right?
And you know, and I didn't. And at that age, I was definitely still trying to be the best person I could be, you know, and I think it helped me a lot. But as an adult, I just couldn't find that connection. And I mean, I really didn't come back to faith until I was here, you know, and it didn't take long.
It's the path of religion versus relationship. Yeah. And so, you know, sometimes we, you know, all of us are like that. If we're doing things because we think it's the right thing to do and just makes us a good person, that's religious almost in a way, where you have to take the path of, am I actually having a conversation with God and waiting to hear what's next steps? Yeah. So, okay, so then you're working, having some drug abuse, you know, living, how many hours were you working?
Oh, I was working
crazy
7
hours,
a.m.
right?
to 7 p.m.
So drained,
Monday through
no
Saturday,
energy level.
You know?
And then you were parked at one of your friends. You were telling us.
No, at that point I was living with my mom.
Okay.
And then I ended up leaving my job at Toyota. We got into some disagreements about some stuff. What it really boiled down to, I mean, it was a bunch of different things. But the final straw for me and my employer, where my son got sick, and I ended up having to take him to the ER. He had the flu. He had an ear infection. He was teething. It wasn't anything that should have been an ER visit by itself, but it was 3 different things all at once. He ended up getting a fever. I took him to the ER. I called out the day before I took him to the ER because he was sick, and he was 1 at the time. Yeah. And I, didn't feel like dropping that on somebody. I spent 2 days in the ER, and then I called out that following day. And that 4th day that I called out, when I called out, they said, "Hey, it's 4 days in a row. We really need you here. If you call out 4th day in a row, don't bother coming back in." And they were kind of just trying to hold that over my head as, where you're calling out too much. They kind of approached it the wrong way. And I took that very personally, and I went in after that, and I had a meeting with the managers and our foreman. He talked to me, and he said, "Look, man," he goes, "your job's got to come first." And that was my reaction. Was there's no way.
Work-life balance.
And he said, you got to have your priorities in order. And I said, I do. And he says, well, sometimes your job's got to come before your kid. And I was like, then I'm not going to work here anymore. It's never going to happen. Yeah. And I couldn't do it. And I think for a lot of those guys that work there and a lot of the other technicians, that'd be fine. But I didn't.
They don't have kids if they're not needing to make that work-life balance.
And not everybody was doing it by themselves, and like I had my parents to help me, but they had jobs, and I had daycare, but daycare has hours,
And what happens when your kid gets sick?
And what happens when your kid
they
gets sick?
They need to be flexible. Yeah. I get what you're saying.
And, it really pissed me off too, because there had been plenty of times where I could have called out and I went in, it wasn't like I was just calling out a ton,
Right.
I counted up.
You were devoted.
I was there, and I put in the work.
You needed just a little bit of leeway and a little bit of flexibility, and sometimes those positions. I mean, I worked at Mazda Toyota, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I was on the logistics team, and they don't want to give you any kind of flexibility sometimes.
I had just finished up the classes, and I remember after that conversation, I called one of the reps for Toyota, and he kind of told me one of the things that helped me get past it, and one of the things that helped me not take it so personally, he was like, dude, it's the car business. He goes, it doesn't matter where you're at. In the car business, you're a
quotas.
Number. Yeah, you're a number, and that's all you're ever going to be. And he goes, it's nothing personal.
Because they're hitting certain thresholds. They need to put so many cars out on the floor, right? Okay, so now you told us about you being in the car at your friend's house and him giving you the bottle.
Yeah, so you want to know how we got there.
How do we get into the mission, basically?
So if we start from me leaving that job, losing that job, because it was kind of a mutual quit fire type situation.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But when I left that job, my parents weren't very happy. I was living with my mom, and they were not happy with me about leaving it. They had heard rumors about me using drugs,
Yeah.
and they started treating me like that, like a drug addict, And I didn't think of myself as a drug addict. I mean, I had a drug problem for sure, but I didn't picture myself like that.
We don't sign ourselves off yet.
Yeah, and me and my parents started butting heads a lot, and it started getting really bad. I tried moving out a couple times, and I ended up back, and things just got worse and worse and worse. I tried to get clean. I tried everything I could to get clean. And at that point...
On your own.
On my own. And at that point, not having a job, I still had a little bit of, money set aside. And I had ways to buy, what I needed or what I wanted. And I wasn't working. So I, was using. Yeah. And, my kid was still going to daycare. So, I had opportunities and...
You were just blowing through your reserves.
I was blowing through my reserves. I was blowing through my energy, and I was just becoming the worst version of myself, and I kept wanting to stop and get clean, less for myself, but more just because, I had my son, and I was like, dude, what am I doing? I'm going to ruin his life.
You're getting closer to rock bottom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I never did it around my son, right. And one of the biggest things was I never wanted him to know me as that person. I never wanted him to see me. Yeah. You know,
yeah,
I never wanted
yeah.
to see me like that. I never wanted to see, you know, drug use, drugs. You know, I didn't want to expose him to that. You know, I didn't want him to be exposed to that, and definitely didn't want to be the one to expose him to that. And, you know, I tried everything I could to quit, and it just didn't work. It didn't work. It made things worse. I would get worse anxiety, worse depression. I kept feeling like I was worthless, you know, genuinely. And
It's
that got real
lie
bad.
of the enemy. Yeah.
You know, and I didn't know what to do. I picked up another job at a salvage yard. I ended up working there for a little bit. I ended up quitting. Well, yeah, I just left. And I mean, at that point, I was nearing rock bottom. I had a conversation with my mom about her taking my son. And, you know, I'd be over there a couple times a week to check in and not live there necessarily, but I was still kind of living there and just making the best of it. And I really just tried my hardest to get clean. And, you know, the thing that really broke me, and I love my parents to death, you know, and I don't have any resentment against them now. But at the time, the biggest thing for me that just kind of sent me over the edge is with all these bad feelings and all this negativity that was building up in me, all this depression, all this confusion about who I was going to be. You know, I did at one point decide I was going to do whatever it took to get clean, you know, and I went 2 months, I'm talking bone sober, you know, didn't touch alcohol, didn't touch anything. And at the 2-month mark, I got into an argument with my parents over money. This is when I actually had a job at that point, you know, at that salvage yard.
Gotcha.
And we got into an argument about money and about them controlling my finances, which I didn't want them to do.
Right.
And my mom and my stepdad got real mad and just kind of blew up on me about my drug use in the past. And they were like, you know, you're on drugs again. And I was like, I'm not. I was like, I promise you, I'm sober. And they said, no, you're on drugs again. We know it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a problem with, you know, us holding on to your money. And I said, I'm not. I said, I promise you, I'm not. I said, drug test me. I said, you know, like there's nothing going on. And we got into this huge fight. And they ended up telling a couple of members of my family that I was back on drugs, you know, and being someone that had struggled with it so much up until that point.
Well, you felt betrayed.
I felt betrayed, but more than that, I, at that time, felt like that's all I was ever going to be, you know, and whether or not
perception or not,
you know, exactly, you know, no matter what I did, whether I got clean, you know, and did really, you know, got a job, got my life together. Yeah. That's all I was going to be to anybody, you know, I was just a drug addict. And I went right back down that rabbit hole, man. I went that day, you know, my aunt called me and was like, hey, you're not welcome at the house anymore. You know,
because those are two matriarchs. You know, those are two people you set here, and then they're not seeing you where you feel like they need to see you.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, they told me that, you know, that's all you're ever gonna be, and that's I took that straight to heart. You know, and I know they don't mean it, and I don't resent them for it or anything like that. And me and my parents are doing great now. You know, we've reconnected, we've moved past it. You know, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't blame them for saying that. You know, I wasn't a fantastic person. You know,
it's almost like a defense mechanism for. You know, you love someone and you want more for them than they want for themselves at the time.
And I mean, the worst part of it is rather than taking that and getting over it, man, I ran with it. And I just immediately was like, oh, there's reason to go, you know, start using again, you know. And
so then from there, tell us what led you to the Downtown Rescue Mission.
I mean, that fight, my parents kicked me out. Okay. You know, that was it. It was done for. And you know, I tried explaining to them that I was clean. They didn't. I mean, we got into a big shouting match. It was really bad, you know, and they kicked me out. I went and tried to live with a friend. You know, I got an apartment. Well, I call it apartment. It was more of like a, what do you call it? Like a section of a house that I was renting. Yeah. It was about the size of an apartment. Yeah. But I was renting part of a buddy of mine's house from him, and that only lasted for a month. You know, because I was at that point falling apart. You know, I'd left my son with my mom, and I was just kind of convinced that I'm not getting better.
And you're just spiraling.
You know, dude, I was spiraling really bad. You know, I mean, I lost everything. You know, I just kind of threw everything away. I got my truck repoed. You know, I ended up losing that living situation because I couldn't come up with the rent. You know, because I ended up spending it all on drugs. Wow. You know, which was terrible. Yeah. And then after that, I mean, I started just, I wouldn't even get a job, you know, and I've got skills. I've got marketable skills, and I'm a certified mechanic. I went to school for it. I wouldn't even go apply for a job because I was like, oh, dude, nobody's going to hire me. And there was no like.
Well, your value or identity.
Yeah,
like,
it was in the dirt.
Yeah, just
you
down
know.
there.
And I gave up. I remember before I came over here, I had been staying at that friend's house, and I called my mom. And this is, I'm skipping a lot. This is probably a month after I lost that living situation, dude. I was living in a vehicle, you know, and it wasn't even my vehicle. I was sleeping in my buddy's car that had broken down that he was getting rid of, and he, you know, put it in his front yard and was like, hey, dude, if you need a place to sleep, you can sleep in that car, you know? And it was bad, dude.
That's rough.
It was really rough, you know, and the worst part was I wouldn't get better, you know? Everything I tried, you know, it just didn't work. And, you know.
And then you get here.
Yeah.
Right? So you someone dropped you off here or something like that?
Yeah, so I, you know, I had that, you know, what do you call it, event?
Yeah.
I guess would be the best way to call it. You know, sitting in that car and, you know, having that interaction with God. And I met with my mom about a week prior to that. I had called her, and, you know, it's a little hard to talk about, but I'd given up. I mean, entirely. I was in such a bad place at that point.
You get to that level of desperation, right?
I mean, more than desperate, dude. I gave up. I mean, I called my mom and I said, hey, look, I said, I want to fill out some paperwork and give you full custody of Lucas. I said, I don't want him to even know anything about me. I don't want him to know who I am. I said, I'm not going to make it to the week. I said, you know, I'm going to be dead by next week. Wow. I said that, you know, and I meant it. You know, I wanted to die.
That's complete
you know,
depression. Yeah.
It was, I broke. And I mean, spiritually, mentally, you know, I was done for, dude. I was just sleeping in this car, you know, and if I met with one of the neighbors and mowed a lawn or something, I would get money and go buy drugs, you know, and it was terrible. That was my cycle, you know.
It was just a quick fix, medium fix. Just
it wasn't even a fix,
pain.
you know. Yeah. And it was terrible, man. And you know, I wanted to die, and I was there in that mind state of just being ready for it. And, you know, I say a week. It was probably closer to 2 or 3 weeks, and I had ended up just kind of thinking about whether or not that's what I wanted and whether or not I was ready for that. At the end of that, you know, I finally started coming out of that, and I knew of the mission, but I'd never been here. I only knew of it because when I was still working at Toyota, years prior to this, I picked somebody up at the Texaco over here on Sparkman, and it was just some young kid. He was asking me for some money. He said he was hungry. And I bought him some burgers, and I was like, you know, can I give you a ride somewhere? And he was like, dude, I don't know where to stay. And I looked it up on my phone. I'm like, you know, where's a homeless shelter? The mission popped up, and I remember bringing him over here and looking at the campus, and I was like, you know, that's a pretty nice place, you know, just how it looked. And I remember just the trees and stuff, you know, not even so much just the buildings, but just it looked like a church, you know. And I was like, you know, that's a cool place. And I ended up coming here and going to overnight, and my mom brought me over here. I called her up, and I said, hey, let's fill out some paperwork. And I gave my mom that custody, and I came over here. And I remember when I came in, Adam Donovan brought me in to his office. You know, it was one of the requirements to being, you know, in the emergency side, you come in, you talk to him. And I mean, man, he talked to me just so directly, and I could just tell he knew. You know, I didn't know anything about him, you know, and now knowing his story and his testimony, I get it. But, man, that was so influential for me to just walk in and have
someone be
say,
able to read your mail.
Yeah, what's up, man? You know, what's your story? You know, what's going on? I remember one of the first things he asked me, too. He goes, you know, what's your drug of choice? Because I could tell. You know, he goes, you're obviously on something. And I was like, man, that's bad. You know, I hadn't even realized, you know, where I was at. Oh, dude. Oh, Donovan does not sugarcoat things, man. And I mean,
and he is in the exact position he needs to be.
He's
such a blessing.
Oh, man. That first conversation with him, I mean, he asked me, he goes, you know, have you heard of our program here? And I had looked into other programs. I had even considered going to Nashville. At the time when I first came here, too, I was planning on trying to maybe wing it and head to Nashville and join a program up there, you know, I had no idea about, hadn't read anything about. Just, I had seen a flyer for it, and I was like, I'm going to go to Nashville and get in this program. And I ended up coming here, and I had that conversation with him, and he said, you know, we got a program here if you want to get better. And that was one of the first questions he asked me, too. He said, do you want to get better? And I'm like, man, nobody asked me that. You know, my parents had never asked me that. Do you want to
Yeah.
get better? My parents had always, you know, everybody had interacted with me, and in that way, it was always, you know,
In the immediate,
you're
right?
not gonna get better.
Right,
You know,
right.
you're not gonna get better. This is who you are. And he said, you know, you want to get better? I said, yeah, I want to get better. And he goes, well, we got a program. And I said, really? And I said, well, what's it entail? He says, you know, it's a year-long program.
Mm-hmm.
And he walked me through it. You know, you're going to be volunteering. You're going to be going through, you know, 4 different stages.
Yep.
You know, 4 different steps. And he says, you got time right now? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I got time. I mean, I had nowhere to go. I mean, what else am I going to do? He goes, I'll walk you through and give you a tour of the complex. And I'm like, all right. You know, and he walked me through here. And, man, I remember thinking it was too good to be true.
Yeah.
You know, and he ended up getting me in. I was in the program about 3 weeks after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, man, I came over here, and you ever seen that TV series Punk'd on MTV?
Yes.
Right? I
Yeah.
kept thinking someone was going to jump out with the camera, man. It was just too good to be true. You know, I'm serious, man. I was just like...
That's funny.
You know, and it was the funniest things, dude. You know?
Because it's a different perspective. That
well,
we didn't know that.
everybody was so nice. Everybody was so welcoming. The food was good. And I mean, and this, you're going to laugh at this, but I mean, dude, I had not eaten desserts and like pastries or anything like that in months, you know, because I couldn't afford it. Man, unlimited pastries. You know? And I remember he walked me into the kitchen, and there was the cart sitting out, and he goes, yeah, you know, when you're in the program, he goes, now that you're in it, he goes, the pastry cart sits out here in the cafeteria. He goes, if you ever get hungry, just come down and grab
Just help
something.
yourself.
And I was like, do I have to tell somebody? He goes, no, dude, just come get a pastry. He's like,
wild.
you see the gloves right there? Just
Yeah.
go get a pastry if you're hungry. And I'm
That's
like,
wild.
unlimited pastries?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So, okay, so if you had the opportunity to speak to potentially someone listening, a Joey that's, you know, like you, like
Yeah.
what you went through, what would you share to help pivot that person if they're dealing with what you went through?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would tell that person that I know it's easy to dwell on the bad. And I know it's easy to get sucked into that. And I know that sometimes that's all you can concentrate on.
Mm.
But once you realize all that you have to be grateful for, once you realize that, first off, I mean, just the baseline, you know, Christ gave his life for us and bought our salvation, you know, and we have a purpose in this life. And once you realize that life isn't about being depressed, it's about being grateful and giving glory to God, I mean, you'll find your motivation, you'll lose your anxiety, you will wake up smiling again, you know. And I know that
big.
It sounds like just a magic cure, but you really have to welcome into your heart, and you really have to have that heart change, you know.
There you go. Yeah, shake off all that
you
stuff.
have to, you have
the heart
to,
change.
you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I love the term "dead to sin" because I've been there, you know, genuinely, you know. And I never thought I'd make it this far,
Yeah,
you know.
that's good.
I don't know. I know that people listening can't see this, but I want to show you something. Right. This is me 7 months ago. All right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is wild.
That's why. That's what I look like.
Wild.
I took that photo.
Man, that's the
I
streets
took
right
this
there.
photo. Yeah, I don't know if there's
You
any
like
way to,
someone-
can you blur it out, because I'll show the camera. You know, but it's up
I'd
to you.
leave it off,
It's up
leave
to
it
you.
off.
But I mean,
it literally, if I could sum up his picture, to me, it looks like someone from POD.
it's terrible, dude. It is
He
terrible.
just looks like
and
right
I must
off
have
the
weighed,
street.
Oh
but-
man, I must have weighed 140 pounds, you know, and I'm up to like 240 now. You know, I've
Yeah.
gained a good 100 pounds, and I mean, dude, my mindset. I've got fantastic friends here. I've got people that care about me.
good.
We've got the staff here is amazing, you know, and I mean, the best thing is the people here relate and don't judge you, and it's so great to be treated like a human being, you know, and a person, you know, and I really hadn't felt like that in a long time.
The key is restoration of identity, right?
Oh,
I mean,
dude, yeah.
once we lose our identity, and the goal is for our identity to be built back in Christ, because that's how it originally started, right?
Yeah.
The devil wants us to not have our identity. Like, he was loving the fact that you were so desperate and ready to make those type of choices, you know what I mean, at that level.
Well, and I was idolizing something, you know?
And you didn't know who you were and how valuable.
Not at all. Not at all.
You're valuable, you know what I mean?
And I'll tell you what, I had a substance problem, and I'm not saying, you know, where I was using it every day for 10 years, but I struggled with substance abuse for 10 years, and everything I tried, nothing worked. And as soon, I got in here and I realized within the first week that I was saved. Man, I'm 7 months sober, and I'm talking bone sober. You know, I've never even thought about going out and using. I've never thought about drinking, and I haven't had the urge. And I don't know how it's possible sometimes that was just removed from me.
Yeah.
Like magic, you know, and people tell you it's not possible, but man.
Yeah. That's good.
You know?
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, being vulnerable, being transparent like you are. And Joey, thank you for opening up to the community.
Of course,
because, you know, the power is in our testimony, and the ability that you have to share it is going to help someone as they listen to, you know, the stories of hope, be able to walk through. You know, hopefully they don't have to get to that level of desperation. Maybe they cut it off a little bit different, but hopefully you encouraged someone out there.
I really hope so. I really hope so. And dude, my life has just completely turned around, you know. And it's not just the program, but finding like a new direction and a new purpose, you know, bringing people to God and bringing people to Christ, you know.
That's our goal.
God, man, I've talked to, like, you know, old friends and stuff even from before I came here, and I tell them, you know, like I ran into a buddy of mine, you know, I do the fleet mechanic work here, you know, and I go to Advanced Auto Parts. One of my old neighbors, dude, was out there begging for money, you know, a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And I saw him and I said, you know, what's going on, dude? I lost my job. And I said, well, all right, what else is going on? Nothing. You know, I'm like, all right, well, that's probably not true. I said, why don't you come to the mission? You know, it's right up the street. Come to the mission, get in the program.
All we can do is invite.
That's all you can do. You know, and
pray for him.
Dude, when he saw me, though, you know, he saw me and he didn't recognize me. You know, I ran into a guy I used to work with at Home Depot picking up stuff for the mission. And I said, it's funny, his name is Joe, like me. Yeah. And I said, hey, man, what's up, Joe? And he said, do I know you? And I said, it's Joey. I used to be your neighbor. And he says, oh, he said, you got healthy.
God changes our look based off of how healthy our life should be.
100%. 100%. But one of the things I love about that, and you know, it really touches me and it makes me have a feeling of purpose, is when people see that and realize that, you know, God did that. God did that for me. God did that for me. Yeah. And some people, you know, a lot of people gave up on me. And those people that gave up on me, when they see what happened and see the difference, you know, you saw the picture.
Like your sisters. Now they're going to church.
Yeah, and now they're going to church.
It's attractive.
You know? And my sisters, you know, me and my sisters were really close, you know, and my sisters knew about my drug use, you know, like before it was even a problem. Yeah. You know, and my sisters knew when I tried to quit. My sisters knew when I did quit. You know, my sisters were there for that. You know, and they had to separate themselves from me, you know, because they knew it was getting to the point where I was getting really bad, you know.
Well, I just want to say again, thank you for taking the time to sit with us. And this was another episode of Stories of Hope with Joey. And hopefully you guys have an opportunity to tune in and have a full listen to his story and the encouragement that's behind it. Because our goal is not to just share these stories so that, you know, Joey has to go through all that memory and dredge up things. It's so that there's power that you guys can tap into and hopefully make some decision-making changes before you have to actually go through those type of things.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak, man. You know. Yeah. And I hope it was helpful, and I hope it was helpful to everybody listening.
I believe it was.
I really hope so. You know, don't ever give up. Don't ever give up faith, for real. You know.
Yeah.